Are you hoping to carry one of the rarest titles in the game? Or perhaps wanting to farm some of these glorious weapon glams? Or perhaps looking for challenging content you can do alone, even on a free trial? If so, you might be interested in one or more of the deep dungeons. They are special roguelike dungeons inside Final Fantasy XIV, which are made to be done either solo or in a group with up to 4 players, each coming with its weapon glamour, achievement titles, and unique challenges. This is the side content that can keep you busy for as long or as short as you wish. It's also the content that can seem incredibly daunting at first, so I'm hoping this guide can alleviate some of the questions and worries you might have. Deep dungeons typically involve several stages of progress, leveling up your Aetherpool armor, learning different enemy specifics, learning time and item management, and finally optimizing the few challenging bosses. Some players learn more quickly than others, but nobody skips these steps, one way or another. This guide is going to help you understand how to best approach deep dungeons, provided you don't have friends interested in joining you for the ride and have to do it alone from scratch. If you've seen my field instance guides before, you'll have an idea of what to expect. This particular video will be used as an introduction to the deep dungeon system and the tutorial floors of the Palace of the Dead, which have been made mandatory for unlocking any other deep dungeon content in Final Fantasy XIV. If you're just starting your journey and you wish to understand and learn the system well, you're in a good place. If you, however, already have the first 50 floors of Palace finished and have a good understanding of deep dungeon basics, feel free to start with the individual guides rather than this one. This one is formed like a textbook of all things deep dungeon to help you uncover the mechanics of this content. There's an overview of what this guide covers, and don't forget to use the timestamps to jump around as you need. Chapter 1 covers all the core system explanations, how the deep dungeon structurally works, and the intricacies of treasures, commanders, traps, enchantments, and monster spawns. This chapter is very useful if you're fully new to the content and you prefer a visual guide over what the game offers. Chapter 2 will cover tips on getting through the Palace of the Dead, floors 1 to 50 solo. These floors are a requirement to unlock the real progress floors and all of the other deep dungeons properly. Since this task can be somewhat confusing to do solo, it is my hope that this chapter provides you with the tools you need to kickstart your journey. If you're looking into guides on how to progress Palace after 50 or Heaven on High and Eureka Hortus in general, awesome! Links for these are in the description on my channel. The Pilgrim's Traverse guide will also be coming in the future. Palace of the Dead can be unlocked early in the main scenario progression after you finish a level 17 quest into a Copper Hell. You also need access to Quarry Mill, a village in South Shroud. First, go to Gridania to pick up the quest The House That Death Built, which will take you to Quarry Mill. Once unlocked, players can enter Palace of the Dead by speaking with the Wood Whaler Expeditionary Captain. Even though level 17 MSQ was required to unlock this dungeon, you can run it as any job or even a class starting from level 1. It can be used as a decent leveling activity for your side jobs. Upon finishing 50th floor of the palace, you'll get a new quest in Quarry Mill, What Lies Beneath, which unlocks the remaining 150 floors. Also, unlock quests for other deep dungeons become available, provided you have finished the necessary MSQ. You can participate in deep dungeons in parties that range from 1 to 4 players. The stats inside don't adapt to the number of players, so going through it solo is seen as a type of a challenge and has its own special titles and ranking board, which I'll touch upon later. Before we dive into the actual content, it's worth knowing that inside the deep dungeon, you cannot access your gear or armory chest. Deep dungeons rely on their unique power system, Aetherpool, Arm, and Armor. You will find these two values under your character keybind while you're viewing the deep dungeon UI. Their starting value is 0, and each can be raised to 99. Arm affects your primary damage dealing stat, while Armor affects your vitality, giving you more HP. Your weapon inside a deep dungeon will change design in a specific way, usually adapting how it looks like once one of your Aetherpool stats hits the value of 60. You can build these stats by running the contents, mainly from opening the silver treasure coffers and from specific bosses. The Aetherpool you gather is saved between different runs, as long as you've cleared a floor set boss completely. I'll explain floor sets in more detail soon. Once you get to 99.99, there's a system you can use to trade some of those points for weapon glams by trading 10 points at a time for 1 grip right here. If your goal is a solo achievement title, it is recommended to build your Aetherpool to approximately 60 through 60 before you start going further into the dungeon. In Palace of the Dead, luckily, an update in Dawntrail made it possible to get through this requirement rather painlessly. You likely won't even think about Aetherpool much unless you decide to make some weapon glamours from collected Aetherpool. Now, let's first dive into the core functionalities of the deep dungeon system. And don't worry, you don't have to learn all of this by heart. Treat it as an informative dictionary of sorts and return return to it later if you need a reminder of how something works. Since Palace of the Dead is the first available deep dungeon, and finishing a section of it is required to unlock the others, most of the information will be presented from its point of view. If one of the other deep dungeons does anything differently, I'll make that clear. Deep dungeons are structurally formed from sets of 10 floors, which I'll call floor sets, stopping at floor 200 for Palace and floor 100 for the other deep dungeons. Every floor set, for the most part, consists out of 9 randomized floors and 1 boss floor. For example, floor set 1 to 10 is going to have a boss on floor 10, while floors 1 to 9 have a random layout of connected rooms filled with enemies. Now, what goes into this randomness? For one, every time you load into a floor, you'll be placed in a different starting point that connects you to several other rooms to discover. These rooms are hidden on the minimap until you discover them by getting close to them, and there will be 3 to 8 randomly laid out rooms on the floor altogether. In these rooms, you'll find varied numbers of enemies, a key that allows you to move past to the next floor, a beacon to resurrect your fallen party members, which is only useful when running this as a group, randomly placed treasure coffers with useful items, and randomly placed traps that are hidden from the naked eye and that you should be wary of. The key is initially locked, and to activate it, you need to kill a random number of available enemies, which can range from 2 to 13, but averages to about 6 or 7 kills per floor. This key collar loosely ties with the number of kills needed to open the exit, but it cannot be consistently used to predict how many kills are still required. It's worth noting, even if the key is active, you won't be able to use it while in combat. All of this randomness does rely on some specific rules, however. For example, the types of enemies that can spawn on specific floor sets are predetermined. On floors 1 to 10, you'll see these sprites, goblins, hippogriffs, etc. These enemies won't be there for floors 11 to 20, so every floor set brings a unique experience in terms of what you can expect to be fighting, which is very useful for planning, especially later down the line. Also, traps and treasure coffers only spawn on predetermined locations, of which there are many, but this has allowed us as a community to discover some of the safer ways to move around, as well as some of the very dangerous spots I will be mentioning throughout the guides. Every floor is, in reality, loaded from a much larger preset map that is cut into smaller pieces and that never rotates. This allows for many possible permutations of room layouts, but it also ensures every room always has the same neighboring rooms. This is something you'll likely won't ever notice on many of your first climbs, but the more time you spend in a deep dungeon, the more you'll notice specific rooms that are slightly more dangerous than others because they have recognizable neighboring rooms. This is especially valuable on higher floors, which have slightly more varied designs from room to room. In any case, while things here aren't completely random, they always feel unique and bring a slightly different dungeon run every time you do it. Sometimes you can feel really lucky or unlucky, but any amount of luck can be beaten with experience and careful planning. What makes this content interesting is that learning curve you set yourself on, which is much more flexible than the rest of the Final Fantasy XIV content. Instead of thinking about your 2-minute rotation and the rated dance you need to execute, each floor you're making different decisions about where to go, who to target, and how to proceed further, depending on the layout that you found yourself in. Let's start diving into specifics by discussing traps first. Your spawn room, marked with a little flag on the minimap unless you're already inside the room, never contains any traps, so this is the safest room to move around in. Always between the rooms also never contain traps. Other rooms can, but don't have to, have one trap somewhere. They will never have more than one, so if you step on one, you can try remembering that this room is now safe. By default, traps are invisible to you, unless you use a specific item called Commander of Sight, which will show them clearly with this red coloration on the floor. There are 5 different trap types in deep dungeons: enfeebling, impending, luring, landmine, and a creature trap. Enfeebling looks like a yin-yang symbol. It will debuff you for 1 minute, making you deal less damage and lowering your defenses. This trap is not too dangerous. Impending trap has this little eye in the middle, and this one will put 2 debuffs on you and everyone around the trap, including the enemies: pacification and silence. Silence affects spells, while pacification affects weapon skills, making you unable to use them for 1 minute. You can use echo drops to remove the silence, but only Asuna to remove pacification. Do note that echo drops put your sustaining potion on cooldown as well, so it may not be worth using sometimes if healing is your priority. With echo drops in your inventory, this is easy to deal with on casters and healers. It has some niche usage for when you want to hit enemies with it, but as a newbie, I recommend avoiding it. Luring trap looks like an arrow, and hitting it will spawn 3 monsters that are immediately aggroed onto you, but they also take about 2 GCDs to start attacking. This one can be really dangerous, and it is a big reason why you don't want to be running around aimlessly. There are some niche uses for why you might want to step into one, but as a newbie, I recommend avoiding it. Landmine is interesting. It blows up 80% of your current HP, but it also affects the enemies around the trap in the same way. On its own, a landmine should never kill you, but it can be dangerous if you're also in combat, taking other types of damage that can easily combine to kill you. In Final Fantasy XIV, snapshots can sometimes make strange things happen, so be careful with these. However, in many scenarios, utilizing some of your job abilities like shields, heals, or dashes, you can use a landmine to clear out a large number of enemies quickly. This will be a strategy that certain jobs happily rely on while others' jobs avoid. Lastly, the creature traps will turn you into an animal that's unable to cast any spells or attack. In this form, you can only run around and jump, as well as open bronze chests. You can still trigger traps and aggro monsters in this form, so it can be perilous to move around like this or accidentally hit it while you're fighting something else. Funnily enough, while you are in creature form, stepping into another creature trap will uncreature you. In Palace of the Dead, this trap looks like a little toad, and it turns you into a toad for 20 seconds. In other deep dungeons, the trap design looks a bit different. They turn you into a different creature, and they last 30 seconds. The general rule of thumb to avoid any traps in deep dungeons is to hug the wall, aka run closer to the edges of the rooms rather than through the middle. Now, there are some wall traps present in all of the deep dungeons, so this method is not 100% foolproof, but it does reduce the number of dangerous situations you could find yourself in. The safest way to fight enemies is to try and pull them into the hallways between the rooms or your initial secure room and fight them there. Neither of these locations can have any traps. I'll be able to share some of the known trap locations in the other guides during the later floor set progression, but generally try to be careful and don't run into the room aimlessly while fighting something else. As mentioned, you can use Pomander of Sight to discover all of the traps on the floor, as well as Pomander of Safety to simply remove all traps from the current floor. So this brings us nicely to discuss these helpful tools. Pomanders or Protomanders are useful items we have at our disposal in any deep dungeon so far. You can access them through the character menu, where you keep track of the entire inventory of Pomanders you found during your run. They are tied to each specific save slot, meaning the Pomanders you found on one file you can't take with you outside of that file. You can hold up to 3 of the same type of Pomander at once. Every Pomander has a specific benefit to using it. Some affect your stats, some affect the current floor, and some affect the next floor. Deep dungeons have only 3 unique Pomanders each, while the rest of the inventory is the same in all of them. In the description, you'll find detailed information about every Pomander from the very useful DDCompendium website. Here, I'll only cover some of the most useful ones you'll encounter. In any deep dungeon, Pomanders of Steel and Strength have a lot of value, especially while learning. Steel allows you to take 40% less damage, while Strength makes you do 30% more damage and HP recovery by magic for 8 minutes. On later floor sets and on some jobs, Steel is even required for surviving specific enemies. Early in your progression, having Steel and Strength active is very useful for bosses, and a little extra safety on general floors. Serenity is a very useful Pomander that removes all enchantments applied to the floors. We will discuss floor buffs and debuffs at a later time, but this Pomander can be crucial to surviving some nasty floor conditions that can happen. Beware that it will also remove beneficial buffs from a floor if there are any. A useful Pomander available in all deep dungeons is Witching. Witching will turn all enemies around you into chickens, frogs, or imps, making them significantly easier to deal with. Imps still do enough damage to sometimes pose a danger, but generally, Witching can be used to make groups of enemies more manageable when we stepped into a luring trap or accidentally pulled too many enemies. It's a popular "oh shit" button. It's worth noting that the enemies still keep a lot of their properties. For example, same HP values, same aggro type, undead enemies remain undead, etc. So, 2 chickens may not be the same if one was originally a mimic and the other a sprite, for example. Pomander of Flight It will reduce the number of enemies that appear on the next floor, as well as reduce the number you'll need to kill on that floor by half. This can be a handy time saver, especially later on. Pomander of Alteration is effectively a gamble. It will affect the upcoming floor, making sure that one room only spawns Korrigans or Mimics. Korrigans are a pure gift. If you simply touch them, they explode and count as a regular enemy kill. They briefly stun you if you stand close to them as they are dying, so be careful if you're fighting other enemies while killing them. Also, the previously mentioned witching will actually make Korrigans hit harder and not instantly die, so generally don't use witching on them unless you want to force them to move from an unoptimal position by pulling them closer. Mimics, however, are more challenging. We'll discuss them in more detail soon. Some jobs deal with them better than others. Alteration can be useful strategically if you'll know you'll deal with mimics more easily than some other enemies on the floor set. Mimics and Korrigans both also tend to drop more treasure chests on average compared to other enemies, so this can be used to fish out more treasure chests. Pomanders of Fortune and Affluence affect the chances of encountering treasure coffers during your climb. Fortune affects the enemies on the current floor, making it slightly more possible for a monster to drop a treasure coffer upon dying, about 12% more chance. Affluence affects the upcoming floor, spawning more treasure coffers than usual on it. Both are a small gamble, but can be used to get more pomanders on average and therefore can be quite helpful. This brings us to the next topic, which is treasure coffers. You'll find these bronze, silver, or gold coffers everywhere you go in deep dungeons. Each has some specific use. Generally speaking, bronze coffers drop potions, phoenix downs, or potsherds, deep dungeon specific drops that can be exchanged for various rewards outside. Alongside sustaining potions, they are very useful, especially if you plan to go all out for one of the titles. Sustaining potions offer a lot of survivability, and you'll want to be collecting them as much as possible. In a full run of Palace of the Dead, going up to floor 200, you'll want around 300 sustaining potions in your inventory just to be safe. Early on, it helps having a small stack of them as soon as possible when it comes to the bosses. Luckily, these potions also regularly drop, so it shouldn't be an issue collecting enough to help you survive all throughout the duty. Silver coffers are mainly used to affect your Aetherpool, which is your armor and power inside deep dungeons. Opening a silver coffer will sometimes give you points in your armor and arm until you cap at 99.99. However, these coffers can also be hidden explosives, meaning they'll detonate when you open them. This detonation is dangerous as its power is determined by your maximum HP. So if you're lower than 70% of your max HP when you open them, you will get killed. Therefore, please be careful to heal up before opening one of these. Also, as you reach a silver chest, I advise taking a breath before opening one, just in case there's a delayed snapshotted landmine trap nearby. You don't want their damage to combine. This explosion can be valuable though, as it also damages the enemies in the same way, so you can sometimes gamble and kill them by opening an explosive chest. In Palace, these chests have no additional value. However, in other deep dungeons, they do. In Heaven on High, they can drop Magicite, very powerful floor wipe items. In Eureka Orthos, they can drop demi-clones, helper NPCs with special abilities active for the current floor. For Pilgrim's Traverse, they can drop junipers, fey-like helpers that provide various effects. Chances of explosion exist in all of these places, so be careful. Lastly, and most importantly, we have gold chests. Gold chests are used to collect pomanders, and they're very useful in practically every situation during your climb. The only risk in opening these is that sometimes you'll get a mimic instead. Truthfully, mimics can appear in any color of the treasure chest, however this is floor based. Earliest floors contain mimics only in bronze chests, then only in silver chests, and most floors contain them only in gold chests. Because this differs for each deep dungeon, check the screen to see what floor sets you can expect them on. Essentially, once you get past the initial pains of building up early floors and Aetherpool, you will only really be worrying about mimics in gold chests. Do you need to worry about mimics though? They can be quite tricky, but this also depends on your job. Mimics only do 3 things: heavy auto attacks, a small AoE around them that you want to respect, and a cast that applies the annoying Pox debuff. Pox lasts for 10 minutes. It fully stops the auto HP regeneration you normally have, it makes your HP slowly tick down, and it reduces your attack power by 10%. It can only be removed with a Pomander of Purity. It is worth knowing that this ability is always interruptible, so tanks and physical ranged jobs have a lot easier tasks keeping themselves Pox useless. Bronze and silver coffer mimics are also stunnable, but gold are not. However, Pox isn't that horrible. It is more of an annoyance than anything else. It's worth noting that Pox status persists even after dying and resurrecting, with either a raising commander or by another person raising you. Because of the no regeneration effect, Pox acts as your potion spender. You can generally keep yourself alive through Pox with sustaining potions, regular potions, and any abilities that heal you back, such as Cure, Bloodbath, Second Wind, Curing Walls, etc. What is actually scary about mimics is their auto attack damage. Mimics hit quite hard in comparison to any monsters on their floor set, and they also have more HP than most other enemies. In Palace of the Dead, they also have a very wide proximity aggro range if you happen to find them sitting in a room after using an alteration. Therefore, I advise caution. When fighting a mimic, make sure to make some space between you when possible so it misses some auto attacks. Also, don't neglect your heals. If you feel unprepared, don't hesitate to use of witching. On later floors, depending on the job, mimics can be a welcome gift in comparison to some other horrible enemies, especially in Palace. Either way, don't be afraid of them, but be mentally prepared for them to hurt. And always have a plan on how to deal with a mimic if it shows up in the chests you're about to open. The one type of treasure we haven't mentioned yet is the Accursed Hoard. It is a special type of treasure that is hidden from eyesight and can be stumbled upon accidentally or by using a Commander of Intuition. The hoard you find will be briefly saved in your Commander inventory. You're guaranteed to be able to find one hoard within each 3 floors at the very least. If you successfully clear the floor set without getting a duty failed notification, these hoards will appear in your inventory as sacks, their quality depending on the floor you found them on. You can redeem these sacks with an NPC outside for a variety of loot. Each deep dungeon has a rare mount that comes from the highest level variety of the accursed sack, and there are also achievements for finding many accursed hoards altogether. The achievement only tracks the act of finding the coffer and not the sacks you get upon floor completion, so even if you get a duty failed screen for leaving early or permanently dying, hoards you found will count for the achievements. For the Of the Sixth Sense title, you need to find 100 hoards without using an intuition. Usually, you slowly find these on your own while progressing through deep dungeons, as long as you're not using intuition and are sometimes spending time inside rooms, not just hallways. However, if your goal is to farm this achievement, the best method is to repeat floors 1 to 10 in the palace over and over again with some movement strategies in mind. I have left 2 guides for you in the description. For the Hoarder and the Accursed achievements, you can either spend years and years and years of deep dungeon content at the rate of finding 3 intuitions per save file, or you can spend about 300 hours mindlessly grinding using a single save file over and over again. As mentioned, you don't have to successfully finish a file for the discovered hoard to count for the achievement. A popular method is to build up a file from 1 to 21 in Heaven on High, making sure you have an intuition, sight, and a magicite in your inventory. When the file is ready, keep entering it at floor 21, using an intuition immediately. If there's a hoard, use sight and magicite, quickly find it, then leave. If there is no hoard, leave immediately. This method can be done on any floor set, in any deep dungeon. This is just the quickest way. Physical range jobs are recommended for peloton usage, though you can use sprint plus jog combination on any job these days for the speed bonus. Speaking of being mentally prepared for pain after mimics and accursed farm topics, let us dive into floor debuffs. Every time you zone into a floor, there's a chance you'll encounter some enchantments. These can be positive or negative, but most of the time they are negative. All of the possible enchantments will now be shown on screen, but I'll talk about the most important ones in more detail. Before diving deeper into some of them, it's worth noting that enchantments don't mix in random ways. You can get 0, 1, 2, or 3 enchantments per floor, and 2 enchantments from the same groups shown in the overlay will never be present together. The no item penalty means you cannot use any items, commanders, or items from your inventory, such as potions or food. This is one of the most dangerous debuffs, and it is highly advisable to keep your Serenity commanders for this or on higher floors, which is thankfully the only commander still available for use despite the debuff. The no ability penalty affects abilities but still allows items and spells to be used. It ranges from slightly annoying on some jobs to extremely limiting on other jobs. If in combination with no item, it is very dangerous.
Gloom is tricky in the sense that it isn't super horrible on its own, but it's often paired with other stuff and can trick you into feeling safe. It buffs the damage, defense,
and movement speed of monsters,
making some of them on higher floors impossible to deal with because they do too much damage. You can deal with Gloom, and while Serenity is sometimes unavoidable, usually you can pick your enemies smartly and avoid any danger.
Blind affects your accuracy on any job,
slowing your damage down significantly.
And it can be annoying because it often breaks combos.
It's only dangerous in combination with other mentioned debuffs, or in a sense that it often wastes a lot of your time. It doesn't affect crowd control abilities such as stun, interrupt, or sleep. The no knockback penalty is worth mentioning as it affects both you and the enemies.
In Palace, EO, and PT, it will make the Commanders of Rage, Dread, as well as the Mudbolt votive unable to insta-kill enemies.
However, whenever monsters have some draw in or push away abilities, this penalty will also affect those,
making it safer to fight.
The no auto heal penalty also affects
both you and the enemies and can be used strategically
in combination with landmines in any deep dungeon
or Commander of Storms in EO. Occasionally, you'll run into a
room filled with enemies that also holds 4 treasure coffers, one in each corner.
We call these treasure rooms
or monster houses. This can happen at any floor set and with any combination of enemies. Even mimics and Korrigans can appear in a treasure room if you've previously used alteration. You cannot have more than one treasure room on a floor at once. Because of these rooms, it's always worth trying to locate the exit as soon as possible
to ensure the exit room itself doesn't contain this many enemies.
Sometimes it'll be possible to sneak past most of them because of their aggro type being sound or sight and them looking in the opposite direction from you. Sometimes you'll have to clear the majority of the room to get past it. They can be valuable rooms to fight alongside using a Fortune Commander, or to rage if you need to save time. Some theories exist that the last floor sets of each deep dungeon, such as 191 to 200 in Palace, have a higher likelihood of spawning a treasure room. Also, some theories say that using a flight, or even combining affluence with flight and alteration, makes the chances of getting a treasure room higher as well. If you happen to find a mimic treasure rooms in the highest floor sets of any deep dungeon, this has to be dealt with extreme caution. In Palace, mimics have very wide proximity range aggro,
and approach them can be really dangerous as
2 to 3 hits will surely kill you. It is a good idea to use a witching, safety, and then approach with a rage
when handling such a room in Palace.
In Heaven and High, use a safety and a petrification, and in Eureka Orthos you can use witching plus storms or lethargy and fight your way, making your way through. In deep dungeons, each monster has a specific aggro type. There are only 3 types of aggro you'll come across in this content:
sight, sound, and proximity.
For sight aggro, you can refer to the enemy's hitbox, if not the model. Imagine a 45-degree wide triangle in front of the enemy, centered around the arrow of the hitbox. Sound and proximity aggro are both shaped like a point-blank circle around the enemy, about 9 yalms wide. For sound aggro, you can toggle RP walk and safely move around the enemy, just taking care not to touch their hitbox, as the game sometimes interprets this as aggro. Also, it's worth knowing that almost any form of dashes around sound enemies will aggro them. Sometimes server ticks can save you on really quickly animated dashes like Ninja's Shukuchi, but this is not something to rely on. Proximity enemies are going to react to you by simply getting too close to them. There's no avoiding them, generally speaking. In Heaven and High, there's a concealment commander that allows you to fully hide and conceal even from proximity aggro enemies. Also, if the enemy's HP is under 30%, they won't aggro you, which is something that is mostly utilized in Eureka Orthos with the Storms Commander, but can also be utilized in other deep dungeons with landmines on no auto heal penalty floors. You can use a neat trick to help you get a feeling of how far you need to be to avoid aggro range in deep dungeons. Make one unused hotbar into a share hotbar here, and then put either Feint or Howling Fist ability on it. Both of these have 10 yalms range, so when you're targeting an enemy and the ability loses the little X icon, it means that you're just 1 yalm out of the range, and stepping forward will aggro the monster.
The exception to this rule is the Palace Mimic,
whose range is significantly wider than that. Also, it's worth mentioning that de-aggroing enemies in deep dungeons is possible on casters and healers. If you sleep an enemy, a debuff lasts long enough that you can outrun the aggro range. You need about 2 rooms distance to execute this. While majority of the enemies in deep dungeons hang out in their own spawn rooms, some enemies are designated as patrolling units, moving between the rooms constantly. Patrolling enemies are there to make
Fighting from the hallways somewhat less safe,
as you have to keep an eye and not get trapped between multiple enemies coming towards you. Patrols always follow a type of pattern.
they will never turn around unless they end up in a dead-end room.
When they approach a crossing, they'll either turn towards the side path or continue forward. In donut and pillar rooms, they'll never move nearby the closed side of the wall, even though they might at first turn that way. Sometimes, when sharply turning into a corner, they might briefly turn around and then continue to their path.
We endearingly call this dropping the wallet in the community,
And usually don't follow too closely behind a patrolling unit.
in case this were to happen.
Usually when patrols move into a dead-end room, you'll be able to notice which side they lean on and hide yourself in the opposite side of the room if necessary. There can be anywhere between 0 to 8 patrolling units on any single floor, and it is usually a good idea to get rid of them first, especially if a large number of them hinders their movement. I say usually, as sometimes patrolling units can be dangerous and are advised to be ignored, but we'll be covering those as they become relevant in their own deep dungeon guides. Getting more than 4 or 5 patrols on a single floor is rare, and when this happens we usually call these trains, immediately thinking about how to best solve the situation without finding ourselves in a train wreck. Before we finally dive into the floors themselves, it's worth mentioning some save slot restrictions. When you queue into a deep dungeon, a save slot is automatically created here. It remembers your party setup, if you are solo, in a pre-made, or in a randomly matched group. It also remembers your items, and if you have failed a file, aka KO'd. If you, for example, queue into a deep dungeon fully alone in a fixed party, you cannot later continue the same save slot with different people. You need to create a new save file for a new group. If both of your slots are taken and you want to go on a third run with a different team or job, you'll need to reset an existing slot. If you have a KO count of more than 0 on a save slot,
You cannot continue into the ranking floors.
above 100 for Palace and above 30 for Heaven or High and Eureka Orthos. And therefore, you cannot use this file
To work on your solo clear achievements.
Now, what exactly is a KO count? This essentially means you've seen a duty fail notification by either permanently dying to something inside, disconnecting, or leaving the instance without seeing the duty complete letters on screen. If you die but get resurrected, this will not count as a KO. It's worth mentioning that Aetherpool will remain saved on your character in between different save slots. So many people build 2 files in parallel to progress at a steadier pace in the beginning. Since I've mentioned the ranking floors, it's worth explaining that the Deep Dungeon system has its public scoreboard that you can use to compete with other players. This is the only content other than PvP that has such a competitive potential. Scoring deep dungeons usually involves different, riskier, and more planned out kinds of gameplay,
And you shouldn't worry about the score when you're just learning and progressing towards a title. As to how it broadly works,
any enemy kill gives you points, as well as any chests that you open, and any full floor you reveal.
any floor set you finish in under 30 minutes,
Gives a points bonus. Any trap you step into will reduce some of the points, as well as any death you may endure. I have linked Fin's scoring guide in the description for those who want to know more about it. It's great. Now, with all of the basics finally covered and probably mostly forgotten, it is time to set foot into floors 1 to 50 and unlock your first checkpoint, as well as to clear the requirement to unlock all of the other deep dungeons.
Disclaimer: the remainder of this guide will be focused on clearing floors 1 to 50 solo, starting from 0 Aetherpool. Now, it's worth mentioning that this endeavor became a lot easier to do solo since the 7.31 patch in Dawntrail, when gathering Aetherpool and sustaining potions became much easier in Palace of the Dead. You can also do this with a party, which will likely be a bit faster, but you can definitely do this in a fixed party solo as well.
It's worth knowing that if you queue as a fixed party, you can't swap members or jobs between the floor sets, so find someone who can do the whole 50 floors with you. This way, floors should take you about 10 to 15 minutes on average, getting it done in about an hour and a half with cutscenes.
Alone, the floors will likely take you a bit longer, probably 20 to 25 minutes per floor set. Queuing with randomly matched party is not advised,
As you'll likely never find any people to do floors 11 to 50 with. When it comes to choosing a job that you'll use in a deep dungeon, there are a lot of factors to think about.
At the moment, we're not talking about which job to clear with.
We're thinking about which job can more
Easily survive the early floors with very low Aetherpool armor.
Since Palace of the Dead starts on job level 1 and goes up to 60, consider your early skills and abilities when you're picking a job to use.
You will be using potions to survive on almost any job, but I always like recommending jobs that don't completely rely on potions, so you get less affected by bad debuffs and can save most of your potions for latter floors.
My advice would be to take Scholar or Summoner, White Mage, Gunbreaker, Machinist, Reaper, Ninja, or Sage. Scholar is my healer of choice because the fairy offers passive healing the entire time, potentially saving you from tricky trap situations or while you're busy doing damage. Healers are a bit slow but sustainable and likely the most comfortable options. Machinist and Summoner are recommended due to their ranged nature. Their ability to kite means you'll be taking very little damage from enemies, but this playstyle requires some getting used to. Gunbreaker can already heal itself with Brutal Shell on level 4, so it's quicker than other tanks in managing defensive cooldowns better. The only jobs I would highly advise ignoring at this stage:
Black Mage, Monk, and Viper.
They have very limited defensives, limited kiting abilities, and or limited range to work with. Astrologian is also not recommended simply due to very low DPS output. It'll make things rather slow. You can also use Palace to get some actual job experience, so it's maybe a good chance to start leveling a new job here if needed. To queue it, pick Fixed Party and agree to go solo. Floors 1 to 10 offer very few dangers.
Your focus here is twofold. Get to around level 20 to 21 before moving on to the boss on floor 10.
Get as many silver chests opened as possible.
Your main goal on this set is to get to the minimum of 5 through 5 Aetherpool before you reach the boss on floor 10. Since you get plus 5 Aetherpool from each silver chest you find, this shouldn't be an issue, but if you happen to not find many chests, don't hesitate on using a lot of sustaining potions during the boss. The boss himself will give you plus 10 to both of your Aetherpool values, preparing you for the next set.
Every floor in this floor set will consist out of 4 rooms, no more, no less. Your spawn room, marked with this little flag, is always safe from the traps, while others will have traps mostly around the middle of the rooms. So while moving around, hug the walls tightly. There are a few wall trap spots shown on the screen, but as long as you don't move around the rooms while fighting something else, you should be safe even if you step into one. Try to generally avoid using the Commander of Flight on this set, as it reduces the numbers of enemies that spawn, and you benefit from extra kills here for experience. Kill every enemy you see, with no exception, and kill them one by one. Some enemies do decent damage, so pulling more than one can get out of hand easily. Try to open all of the chests you see, but be mindful that bronze chests might have mimics inside. Mimics will be great for your experience gain, but they hit very hard. If on a melee or a tank, don't forget to stun their infatuation cast. Don't open bronze chests while you're fighting something else. Honestly, getting into the habit of not opening any chests while fighting something else is probably a good idea. Fun fact about bronze chests, and only bronze chests, is that you can recognize mimics ahead of time because the chest won't allow being opened while you're casting. Most of the enemies on this floor set have side aggro, meaning sneaking behind them is possible. Yarzans and sprites are sound aggro, meaning you can avoid them by slowly walking around if needed. Beware of Yarzans, as they can make you more vulnerable to attacks. They can be dangerous when pulled with something else. The biggest concern of yours will be Hornets, since they cast a final sting after about 20 seconds, taking away 99% of your HP.
This can be outranged,
or you can use a witching or a stun to stop the cast when it happens. Hornets have proximity aggro, meaning they will attack you if you get too close. They start appearing on floor 6, so it's a good idea to save its strength for that, even though fighting them one by one usually means you'll have no problem killing them before this happens. The beetle patrols can hit quite hard, so be ready to pop a potion if you have any at hand. They have a tank buster called Rhino Attack, which you can avoid by hiding behind the wall. This shouldn't be any problem to survive anyway, unless you're fighting more than one thing at a time.
on floors 7 to 9,
Try using your fortunes, and if you have any sights and witchings, you can use them to locate luring traps and try to spawn more extra enemies. Fortunes paired with extra enemies mean more chests, meaning more potential silver coffer upgrades. If you do use a luring trap, make sure to quickly focus hornets, rhino beetles, or yarzans in case they spawn.
you should be done with this floor set in approximately 20 to 25 minutes by killing all of the monsters.
The boss is quite straightforward. All of his AoEs are easily avoidable. He does give you a wind damage over time effect every minute or so.
This is where you'll want to use a sustaining potion.
It is recommended to use a steel for this boss if your Aetherpool is lower than 5 through 5 and and you can't heal yourself consistently after his raid wides. This floor set has a different layout, and it has a couple of dangers to be aware of. The cave-like layout can have traps on the walls in the so-called donut rooms or dead-end rooms, so never walk around those rooms while fighting something else. The general advice I can give you for this floor is to kill every enemy you see and beware of the 1-minute respawn timer so that enemies don't spawn on top of you while you're fighting. You want to reach this boss being at least level 34 or 35, both for damage and survivability. The most dangerous enemy to be worried about here is Slime, which casts Enrage about 20 seconds in. These are level 23, and you shouldn't have an issue with them if you have fully killed the previous floors as we discussed.
Slimes have sound aggro,
so you can toggle walk and sneak around if you'd rather avoid them. If you hit a luring trap with these guys, it is advisable to focus them first, and even use a witching if there are more than one that pop up. The second dangerous enemy in this floor set is the Cobra Patrol.
It does decent damage,
but what makes it extra dangerous is the ability to eat you alive if you happen to hit a toad trap while it can see you. Again, I advise not to fight enemies in rooms, but rather stay in safety of the hallways. Other enemies here are not spicy. Toads can be a bit annoying due to the draw-in effect, and Morbles due to their proximity aggro, and Bad Breath, Conal that you have to stay close to easily avoid. The aggro list is on the screen. It can be helpful to remember sound and proximity monsters. Remember to kill as many enemies as possible to get yourself to the right level range, and if you're lacking steel or strength for the boss, don't forget to use some fortunes or affluences whenever you have a chance. Of course, don't skip opening gold chests.
This boss can be spicy for the underprepared.
Due to its Sting Buster and the 2 bees that spawn every minute. Both bees cast Final Sting if not killed on time, taking 70% of your max HP each. If both survive, you're dead. So anytime the bees appear, heavily focus on them. Get at least one of them down and prepare heals for the second one if you cannot DPS them both in time. Strength and Lust can be helpful here to speed up the damage, but with appropriate focusing, you should be fine. Note that you can also use a witching on the bees to stop the Final Sting from happening in spicy situations. This floor set has yet another layout where wall traps can appear in the so-called pillar rooms, so be very careful when you're moving through those. As usual, don't run around while fighting something. Try to always fight from the hallways. The general idea here is to try and hit level 50, so you're again going to try and full kill the floors. This floor doesn't have enemies that would be considered too worrisome. Drakes apply smoldering scales to themselves, which reflect magical damage at you, but you can wait this out and then continue attacking. Wyvers can hit quite hard, and they have proximity aggro, so be careful not to pull more than one when they start appearing.
If this happens, consider witching or steel.
It's also worth noting the Minotaur patrols, which use the 111-ton swing soon after the pull.
You need to get away from this.
Other than these, everything else that's dangerous is telegraphed, so you'll be fine as long as you never get hit by the orange. You might start getting rages, so you can use one if needed to speed up the larger floor layouts. If your self-sustainability is good, you could also pop a safety or sight, pull a bunch of enemies, and then witching lust them into quickly clearing some floors.
This is very viable on healers or DPS and tanks while using a sustaining potion.
You could pop one before using a lust, it will keep you alive.
This boss can be a bit spicy, so keep your sustaining potions rolling.
It is very advisable to have strength and steel ready for it. If you take a lot of damage and cannot heal back for a while, run around the edge of the arena for a little bit, as most of its damage comes from its melee auto attacks. Its mechanics are quite simple. Every cycle, he will set down 4 puddles baited by you, 2 fire and 2 ice puddles. You always want to move out of these as he's hitting you. After the 4 puddles, he'll go into the middle and cast Fear itself, which puts terror on you if you get hit. To avoid this, simply go into the boss's hitbox and wait it out till the cast goes off. You can bait the puddles around the hitbox, provided you can survive the auto attack damage, to reduce the amount of time you need to spend moving into the middle. This floor set doesn't have that much going on, but it does have a new layout which has a lot of wall traps, so be extra careful that you fight all of the enemies from inside the hallways. This is the only floor set in Palace where mimics can appear in silver coffers. They are no longer in bronze. They are still stunnable and interruptible, but you can no longer detect them by casting magic while opening the chest.
Since your Aetherpool level should be at least 30 through 30 by now, just from bosses, you can skip the silver coffers on this set if you want to avoid all of the mimics and chest explosions.
This floor set will be your first encounter with the succubus enemies. When you pull the succubus, be extra careful not to get hit by dark mist, as it applies 10 seconds long terror, which can be lethal in combination with other sources of damage. Catapulpus patrols inflict petrification with their gaze mechanic, so definitely respect that by either looking away or going behind the enemy. Monks will suck you in and then use an AoE, so be prepared to move after a sucker happens. All of these enemies appear often on later floors with similar abilities, so it is worth remembering what they can do. Generally, kill everything on the floor until you hit level 60. After that, you can safely skip some kills whenever you open the key. Try to fish out and save 1 strength and 1 steel for the boss. Lust can be very useful, so if you have any, keep them for the boss. You'll want to be level 60 for this boss, and if you have pox on you, either purity it or wait it out until it passes. Strength and steel are highly advised. This boss is dangerous because it summons 2 ghost adds in its regular rotation, which you must kill before it casts Scream. Scream is a 10-second terror mechanic, and the ghosts will kill you if they are still alive during that time. Whenever the adds spawn, focus on them, and if you must, use Lust to speed up killing them. If the job you are using has a shield, you can use it to avoid the terror from Scream, giving you some extra time to kill the 2 ghosts. Same style of floors as last time, so be careful of many wall traps that are around. Fight in the hallways as much as you can. From now on, mimics cannot be found in bronze or silver chests, they will only be in gold chests. They are no longer stunnable. Beating this floor set unlocks the floor 51 checkpoint, so you can freely use up all of your commanders if you want to. No need to save them for a future set. Since ideally you're level 60, you don't need to do any more kills than what is required to open the key for the next room, usually between 4 to 8 kills per floor. Try to save 1 strength and 1 steel for the boss. Lust can be useful, but not necessary.
Manticore patrols
do untelegraphed conal, Ripper Claw, which you can outrun or stay behind the enemy to avoid. Respect it and try to keep an eye on patrols so you don't get overwhelmed by them. Wraith patrols do a very large AoE, which inflicts terror if you get hit, so respect it and plan to have enough room to move away when you pull one. Personas and boots
will often paralyze you.
These attacks you can technically outrun, but the range is too wide to matter. They're slightly annoying, if anything. If on a healer, you can Asuna the paralysis, or even shield it in the first place. These enemy types often repeat on later floors, so try to remember what each of them does to speed up the later learning process. And finally, welcome to the pre-checkpoint boss, Edda. She's not difficult to deal with, though she can be
tanky on some jobs.
Have your potions at the ready as well. Most of her attacks are telegraphed, so simply respect them. Cold Feet is a gaze attack that you must pay close attention to, and turn around when she's casting it.
Getting hit by this will cause a 10-second long confusion,
and likely result in you getting hit by other stuff as well. Black Honeymoon is a decently hitting raid-wide AoE, so make sure to keep your HP above the 70% threshold at all times. In Sickness, will put a 20-second disease on you, which can be Asuna'd if you're on a healer. Otherwise, it's just gonna be annoying as it slows you down, but you can use Sprint to help you move from any AoE during this if you need to avoid something.
Once you have the checkpoint at floor 51 unlocked, you can use it for farming additional Aetherpool if your goal is to progress the dungeon further, of course, leveling alternate jobs, or just starting your runs here to practice the later floors.
As you probably noticed so far, the higher your Aetherpool is, the lower the chance that the silver chest procs an upgrade. This is because your Aetherpool caps for specific floor ranges, and to assure procs, you'll need to climb higher and higher.
If you're interested in progressing further and still need to reach approximately 60 through 60 Aetherpool value, you can farm this by repeating floor set 51 to 60 a few times, which you can do either solo, in preformed parties, or in matched parties.
This can be either fast or slow, depending on your data center activity and whether it is primed time or not. This is also a good experience leveling method for your side jobs. In terms of fighting floors 51 to 60, everything here feels quite squishy, though sometimes monsters can surprise you with their damage, so try to single pull on any job other than a healer.
Open gold and silver coffers as you're moving through the floors without wasting too much time exploring, as your primary way of getting Aetherpool is defeating the boss.
Use items generously and feel free to move forward as soon as the exit is open. The boss, Black Rider, is rather repetitive and doesn't actually hurt much. Make sure that Valfodder doesn't kick you near any of the yellow orbs that spawn on the edges of the arena,
and that you walk out of each purple puddle the boss drops.
Valfodder can be negated by using a shield or knockback immunity, like Surecast or Arm's Length. After you've hit sufficient Aetherpool level, feel free to continue climbing the next sets in a fixed party, solo or with your pre-made group, and try to get yourself to 75 through 80 or more before you continue past floors 101. And remember that
Before floor 100,
if you die, you can still redo the same save file even though it has a KO number on it. You won't be able to get past floor 100 with such a file, but it shouldn't matter for the Aetherpool building and the practice. If you want a tutorial for these floors, they are explained in my Ultimate Palace of the Dead guide, linked in the description. I will say floors 51 to 90 are not very hard, so you can also just quickly take a look at the Deep Dungeon Compendium for monster information and glance at the boss guides. You'll find a link to it in the description. Once you are at 75 through 80 or so, you can allow yourself to get past floor 101. The procs there should be much more common, and you should not have any issue getting to 99.99 before floor 150, where you really need to be capped. Now, with the floor 51 checkpoint unlocked, Aetherpool grinded, you're ready to dive further into Palace progression or unlock some of the other available deep dungeons and go hunt those rewards. Guides for all of them are linked in the description. For now, thank you for watching and happy deep dungeoning!